Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Rick Boggs. I'm the head of product over at Limble CMMS. And today I have with me Miguel Ramos, our chief operating officer and co-founder. Today, we're going to be presenting the maintenance saving calculator, and I will let Miguel take it away. First, I think we also wanted to do a couple questions and try to get an understanding of who's with us.
That's right. This is going to be a very interactive presentation, so get close to your keyboards and we'd love to hear where you're from. Go ahead and put in the chat where you guys are from. All right. Calgary, Boston area. Okay. Ontario, Canada. Cleveland. A lot of manufacturing out in Cleveland. It's great.
Paris.
Romania. I love it. Your house, I hope you're comfortable. Get comfortable for this.
You and me both.
South Africa, great. Peru, yo viví en Peru. Great place. All right. Perfect. San Francisco, Houston, man, we have everybody.
All over, yeah.
Okay, guys, new question. I'd like to know what industry you are in. Virginia, consulting services, great. Okay, perfect. This is going to be helpful for consulting services. Energy, awesome. I think energy is a really specific, great case. Sales, consulting, telecom, medical. All right, yeah, we're getting a huge variety here. This is perfect. This is really helpful. Okay, let's see here. Helping people, I like that one. Quantum, cables manufacturing, shop floor management systems. I like that. IIoT for facilities. That's great. Okay, Department of Defense. Perfect. All these, what I think is really great about anything to do with maintenance is that it applies to all industries pretty much equally. The principles apply. Got a new question for everyone. Tell us what your title is or what your role is. This is going to be important for us to understand, making sure that we're going to cover all of the things that are going to be helpful for all of your roles. Maintenance management system, project director, president, nice. That's great to be able to see it from the top level. Founding partner, I can relate to that. All right, senior engineer. All right. Electrical engineering student, nice. Learn early, I love it. All right. Got a good variety there. Okay, now we have a couple other questions. Let's actually, I might ask some more questions later, but let's actually get to our poll. This is going to be our first poll of the session. And if you had more budget, what would you do with it? So go ahead and select the answer that works best for you. And then if you are selecting other, I need your help by putting that other item in the chat. So if we're not covered here with the other item, go ahead and write in the chat what you would choose. And Lucian, can you confirm that we're receiving responses on the poll?
Yes, we are getting responses. It's going above 25% right at the moment. So
I think there's a bit of a typo on it. So the question should be, if you had more budget, what would you do with it? Oh, hire more people. I like that. A professional engineer and business developer. Great. Spend more time on process work ahead of implementation. Great.
Gotta get your house clean. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. All right, Lucian, are we ready to show the poll results, or do we need to give it a little bit more time? Lucian.
Here we go.
Okay, hire more people is the #1. I think that is fantastic, and that makes sense. Right now, it's really difficult to hire people, as you guys have probably heard. That's the thing that I hear most commonly is from our customers is they say, hey, we need to hire more people, and it's getting harder and harder to do that. All right, better tools, new equipment. Software was at 20%. Okay, so if you've put software, I want you to put in the chat what kind of software or what you would want to do with that. And while we're waiting for that, I have a comment about hiring more people. One thing is right now, because everybody has this labor shortage, there's kind of two ways to solve that problem. There's hire more people, or another way is to make your people that you currently have more efficient and effective. And today we're actually going to talk about some of that a little bit in this calculations that we're going to be doing. Now, of course, the primary purpose of this is to talk about how to use a calculator to help you speak the same language as the people that are going to be providing that money. So that money should be able to be something that's very doable to get. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay, some of this, let's hear. We think we got our first answer on the software. Improve understanding of technology among employees, predictive maintenance and MES software. That's great. Machine learning for predictive maintenance. Fantastic. All right. Well, we should really start with some introductions. Now that we've polled everybody, Rick, if you would like to introduce yourself first, that'd be great.
Yeah, just a little bit about me. So yep, I'm our VP of product over here at Limble CMMS. My background is in geographic information systems and also being a CMMS administrator at both a university and a wastewater treatment plant.
Great. And we're going to be borrowing on some of Rick's industry knowledge, since he's been actually in that seat and doing something that is very similar to what some of you are doing. And my background is actually in medical device. I first started wanting to make products that made the world a better place, helping people have better health. But eventually that led me to software. It's kind of a weird jump, but the reason why I went from medical device to software is with the medical device, you have to wait a long time before you can actually get the product out on the market. But with software, you can make a change and help people that same day. And that is what led me to Limble. So I am one of the co-founders here at Limble, and we started Limble because when we started talking to maintenance professionals, we heard the same thing over and over again, and that was that they just didn't have any good options when it came to a good maintenance management software. We noticed that a lot of them wanted something that was useful on a mobile app. They wanted something that was just easy to use. It didn't take time to train people. And that's what led us to building Limble. And it was definitely made to be something that's easy to use on a mobile app, easy to use anywhere. And this has been one of my favorite things to work on that I've ever had a chance to work on, because I get to work with people every day who are in this maintenance world. And one thing that I love about working with people in maintenance is they really care about doing things better, and they don't always get the recognition they deserve. And so I feel like maybe some of you can understand where I'm coming from there, and we can all talk about how we can help you guys a little bit through this session. So let's go ahead and jump into a few things to talk about today. The first thing I would like to present on is the story behind the maintenance calculator. So here at Limble, we're always trying to find ways to help the maintenance industry more. And we noticed that there was kind of a common trend that when we would talk to these maintenance professionals we work with, they are very good at understanding the technicalities of their machine, getting their team working together. But when it came to talking to management, it was more difficult for them. And they would often go in with these high hopes to talk to their management team and get more money for the equipment they need, or the software they need in some cases. And they would come back pretty disappointed because management would not have agreed to the request that they had submitted. And it was so frustrating to them because they knew it just was a no-brainer. It made total sense to them, but they weren't able to convey that to the management team. And so this calculator was built to help them come up with a way to talk their language. So one thing that I think is really important is that whenever we're speaking to an audience, we need to think about how do we speak their language. And in this case, they were talking to management, and management speaks the language of money, finances. And it makes sense, right? Because when you have to run a company, you think if we don't have the money tomorrow, everybody's going to lose their jobs. And so whenever you speak to them about something that isn't money related, it's something that isn't in the world that they have to operate in. And this calculator is to help somebody in the maintenance role speak that language of finance, but using what they know as maintenance professionals. All right. So the next part about this is really this came from talking to hundreds of maintenance professionals. And after seeing this come up over and over again, we came up with a very simple calculator that can help a maintenance professional in any industry. And we would call this like a simple life hack to help you and in your individual situation. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to show you what this calculator looks like. This is just an Excel sheet. You can, everybody will be getting a copy of this after the presentation. But let's say that you want to get more money for something, whether that's equipment, hiring more people, or anything else. You have to make a justification as to why. And so this is the place that you start. So we're going to run through an example, me and Rick, and then I would like to have a volunteer, and we'll run through an example that works for your facility. So Rick, let's just do an example. What kind of a company in this example would we be? What is it that your company makes in this hypothetical example?
Let's say that we manufacture specific car parts.
Okay, so a car part. And how many of those car parts do you make an hour?
In an hour, we probably make around 2,500 parts.
Okay, so high volume, great. And how much do you make off of each one of those? What do you sell them for?
Each item, yeah, we probably make on average about $2,000.
2,000? Okay, so this is a really high volume. Okay.
So do we have a volunteer as well from the audience? Happy to operate.
We'll do a volunteer on the second round. We'll do the first one here together, and then we'll choose a volunteer for the second round.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lucian. All right, and how many breakdowns do you guys have per week?
Yeah, we probably have about 3 breakdowns a week.
Okay, 3 breakdowns a week. And I'm actually gonna change this to more like 20, like maybe like 200 or something, because that's a pretty high volume facility. So okay, and then so you're doing you have 3 breakdowns a week. So this is a breakdown that prevents production from happening.
Mm-hmm.
And how long does it take to repair that machine when it goes down?
About 2 hours.
About 2 hours. And then one thing that I think is important to ask here is, are you able, as soon as that breaks down, are you able to respond to it right away? Does it take a little bit of time for you guys to get to that?
It does take a little bit of time to get to that.
Okay. How long does it take for you to get to the?
Probably like 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay. So we'll say 15. So that's a quarter of an hour. So that's going to be 2.25 there. So what that means is that on average, you guys are seeing almost 7 hours of downtime a week. That turns out to be a weekly cost of 3.3 million, and that's an astronomical cost. Now, these are made up numbers. We're going to choose a number that works for your guys' team, but I want you to see the process on how all of this works. Okay, and then the next question I have for you is, how much do you spend on well, let's move on to this section actually. So what's the average wage of a technician at your facility, Rick?
45.
45. We got California wages here. Okay. And then where this is coming from is, you have to remember that if you're paying people per hour, you're also paying them on benefits. Where this $18 is coming from is, we actually took the national average from 2021 that's reported by the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And so this number is saying that on average, if you pay somebody $1, you're actually spending an additional 41 cents on other benefits for the company. So that should also be taken into account. So that hourly cost is always higher than what you pay just a straight salary wage. Okay. And then let's talk about in your facility, some ways that maybe there is some inefficiencies for your maintenance team, right? So do you have any examples of some things that might be kind of a detriment for them being productive as a maintenance team?
Yeah, generally speaking, the things that we lose the most amount of time on are one, searching for parts in our warehouse and trying to see where they are, how many we actually have in stock, and trying to find the parts that are related to our assets. Secondly, the bigger thing that we lose most time on is just the amount of data entry and going back and forth from the computer to going out and actually working on a piece of machinery. And so that amount of data entry and time it takes there is probably the most time that we lose.
Right. Yeah, and when it comes to data entry, one of the most common things I see is that you have technicians that either have to fill out a piece of paper and turn that into someone, and so you're wasting time with that piece of paper, or sometimes they have to enter it into the computer at the end of the day, and they're trying to remember what they had to do. Or sometimes paperwork gets lost, or that's just not a very efficient method. And then I think that what you said about finding parts, that is a huge thing. One of the biggest ways of wasting time isn't just finding the part in-house, but then having to send somebody out to go buy a part. So you have to send them to run down to a specialty store, for example. And then there's a lot of other inefficiencies just from people not working on the highest priority things. So in your case, Rick, how many hours a day do you think your team loses due to that inefficiency?
As a total or individually per technician?
Individually per day, per technician.
Individually per technician, I would estimate maybe we're in like the half hour, 45 minutes range.
Okay, half hour, 45 minutes. And I would say that that is actually a little bit low for what we see for most of the companies out there. The typical range that I see is in that 1 to 2 hour range, more in the 2+ hours. Because again, you're always looking for parts. Maybe you're filling out a lot of extra paperwork that takes a lot of time. And how many of these technicians do you have on your team?
We have about 60 employees.
You have 60 employees. Okay, great. And then are you guys working just Monday through Friday, or do you also work weekends?
Mostly a Monday through Friday shop here.
Great. Monday through Friday shop would be 250 working days a year, roughly then.
Mhm.
All right. So that is a total, as far as that productivity loss, that is $700,000 a year in productivity loss. And that is actually something that I see as fairly typical to see these pretty high numbers. And this is where the savings calculator is so powerful, is if you have come up with these numbers, they don't have to be exact, they can be rough estimates, but when you can see that there's this large productivity loss in your company, you can easily share that with the management at your company, and they can see why that request you're making is so important. So I'm going to go back over here to this downtime. I'm going to change this from 200 to 20. Now, if it were to be something like this, and you could say, look at all this downtime we're having, now you have to make a case for what you would do with that money. And if you're saying, hey, I need to hire another person, and that's going to be an extra, let's say, for example, $100,000 a year, then you can show them that if you can reduce that downtime, look at the amount that's being lost. And if you can show them how much you can reduce this downtime by having another person, then that becomes really powerful. And it makes it really easy for them to see the decision that you're making and why you want those additional resources, and it becomes a no-brainer for them. All right. Well, thanks for running through that hypothetical situation for me. I'd love to get a volunteer and we could run through one of your examples. So if you would like to volunteer, go ahead and write in the chat and tell us what kind of products you produce. And we will use you as an example.
Yeah, in the meantime, we have a couple of questions that came in that we
Great.
can answer. One of the most recent ones was Do your clients all have this data already on hand? Assuming not, how many days do you think it takes to determine accurate numbers?
That's a great question. You know, one thing that I think about these numbers is they are estimates, and it's okay that you don't have the exact number. I would think that most of our customers do have these numbers on hand. When we talk about this, it's something that we can calculate them really quickly, because we'll ask them, for example, how many widgets do you produce an hour? Most people know within a range. It doesn't have to be exact. Sometimes you have companies that they produce 50 different parts. And so then it's a little bit more difficult for them because they're saying, well, we have so many different parts. But you just start with these averages. And we find that if they start with these averages, that they can kind of make a quick guesstimate, then they're able to kind of do a gut check against each other. Maybe they'll have one or two people in the meeting with us, and they'll say, okay, yeah, that sounds about right. And the numbers don't have to be perfect, because typically the numbers are there's always so much room for improvement that it's okay if they're a little bit higher, a little bit low, because in the end, what matters is they're trying to show management that may have no idea what these numbers are. And so you're giving management maybe the first time a view into the numbers that really matter to making this decision. So let's go through an example. Do we have any volunteers yet?
See, Dylan
okay.
Arnold.
Dylan, yeah. Perfect. Dylan, we would love to have you run through this example with us. Dylan, you have been made a presenter. I think you can take yourself off mute, and then we can actually run through one of these for your circumstance.
Yeah, so if you just want to unmute yourself, Dylan, you can talk.
All right, I just had to make sure Chrome had all the permissions set.
Oh, good deal. Well, Dylan, thanks for volunteering. Could you start off with telling us a little bit more about what your company does and what your role is?
Yeah, so basically, if you guys have seen a lobster pot or a crab trap or something like that, it's probably ours. We make 95% of the world's coated wire mesh for like underwater applications. That also plays into, you know, if somebody wants coated security mesh or fencing for zoos for, you know, the walkways, they sometimes have mesh on the side of them that are coated for being outdoors and not rusting. We make all of that stuff. So yeah, pretty much if you've seen wire fencing, mesh, or lobster traps, it's coming from our company.
Very cool. What do you use to coat the wires with?
It's a PVC coating.
Oh, great. And what is your role there, Dylan?
I'm a process engineer.
Okay, fantastic. And then do you work with the maintenance team, or are you more just on the manufacturing side?
Kind of both. So it's a very flat organization where everybody kind of has their hand in everything. It helps with clarity with the process and saying, hey, where are we trying to go as an organization? So there's not a lot of like, oh, this is out of my hands, I don't know what to do, this is on my boss's level or something like that. It's all very much, hey, if you want the answer, go across the floor and ask the guy to get the solution and see where we can improve, see what they're experiencing, and where they're saying there's issues that pop up. So yeah, I actually sit in the same office as the maintenance manager, so we're pretty hand in hand with a lot of the stuff that goes on.
Perfect. Well, that's great information, Dylan. Well, you ready to run through an example?
Yeah, just refresh me on what I'm specifically talking about.
So what we're going to do is fill out this calculator for your facility. So when it comes to mesh, I'm sure you don't measure it in units. You probably measure it in some sort of, I don't know, maybe area or footage. What do you guys measure there for this mesh?
Typically feet. A lot of the downtime stuff is more towards actual machine cost to run it, but I don't have specific numbers, but I can give you like estimates. Yeah,
estimates would be great. So how many feet of wire do you produce an hour, or mesh, I should say?
So I'll stick to one line because we're dealing in segmented parts where we weld it on one, galvanize it on another, and then coat it on another, and that's all run at different speeds. So we're running about 30 feet per minute on one of the lines. I'll leave that out for proprietary reasons, but
So you're running 30 feet per minute. So that'd be
Yep.
30 times 60. So that's, 1,800 feet per hour.
Mhm.
And then, as a rough estimate, what do you, how much do you make off of each foot?
Ooh, let me see.
And
Because I
again, it
only
has
know
to
rough.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
has,
I
a
only
rough
know rough
estimate's
estimates a
great.
roll.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say $50 a foot.
Oh, $50 a foot. Okay.
That's probably way over, but
And we can bring this down a little bit if you think that
yeah,
estimate's a little too high.
let's bring that down to 5.
Okay, sounds good. So what that would mean is that every hour that your machines are running, you're making $9,000 on this line. And this is just for one line, right? Of the multiple lines that you guys run there,
Right.
at the company.
Yep.
How many lines do you guys run?
3 types. We
So
have
3
various
types.
different welders. I don't even know if I can count the number of welders we have, but
Okay.
yeah, 3 different types of lines.
Okay. So we could make an estimate that if this was just for one line, then any number we see here should actually be multiplied by 3 to kind of
Okay.
account for the other lines. How often does this line have a breakdown in the week that actually prevents the line from being able to make more, produce more end product?
Actually, it's pretty non-existent. I mean, it's maybe once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks. Like it's pretty solid. Knock on wood. I'm gonna say that now and get a call saying it's down, but yeah, probably.
So you guys have refined your process a bit. That's great. Yeah. So you're saying once every 2 to 3 weeks then, and then when it goes down, what typically causes the line to go down? Is it a problem with one of the production machines, or maybe a wear breakdown, or what do you typically see?
Typically, I'd attribute it to a machine failure, whether that's electronics reaching end of life, because we run pretty much 24/7. It's 24/6. We don't run on Sunday mornings and midday, but Sunday night we're back up. So it's around the clock pretty much. But no, electronics would be reaching end of life would probably be the number one cause. Either that or random failures that just pop up.
Yeah. Okay, great. So when it goes down, how long does it typically go down for?
It'll probably be about 3 hours on average, sometimes more, sometimes less.
Okay. So I'm gonna put that it's 3 hours on average. And then you said that this is happening kind of like every other week. So that may look like a 1, but I think that's just a rounding thing. Let's fix that. Yeah. So what that means on even though it sounds like you're not having that much downtime, that 3 hours per week, or that 3 hours every other week, still adds up to about $700,000 a year in downtime.
Right.
And this is why these numbers are so good to see. Because if I would have tried to do the math in my head, I would have said, maybe Dylan doesn't have a problem. Maybe this isn't a good example. But when you see this, that $700,000, that's a lot of money. And I'm sure anyone at your company would love to be the one that can say, hey, I saved the company $700,000.
Oh, yeah. And this is still one line, right? There's still multiple lines here that we would want to run this on.
Right.
And just make the assumption that this is going to be a lot more.
Yeah. So I think this is a fantastic example, Dylan. And if it's okay with you, I'd love to keep going on with this example, if you're okay with that.
Definitely.
What's the average wage of a technician that does, I should actually ask first, do you have people that do full-time maintenance? Their job is to maintain equipment and prevent equipment from breaking down?
Yes. Yep.
Great. How many people do you have on your team that do that?
So just on first shift, we have, trying to count in my head, count all their faces. Probably about 8 people on a given day. I think the team's like 10, but with people going in and out, probably about 8.
Okay, so you have 8 people working at a time, but the team is 10 people. of maintenance people. Okay,
Mhm.
great. And then what's the average wage of those technicians? And again, this is just an average.
Yeah, I'd probably have to say 25 an hour. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, okay, we'll say 25. And again, the benefits we're calculating the benefits in there because your company probably pays some sort of insurance or something for them as well,
Yep.
or health benefits. So let's talk about some loss in productivity that they might be having. Since we're not super familiar with your facility, I'm going to ask a bunch of questions to you, but
Yeah, go for it.
yeah, how do they know how do they get their work orders? How do they get assigned to them?
So we have a work order system that gets passed down from our maintenance planner, and then they, based on the maintenance planner's knowledge of who's good at what task, they'll say, oh, all right, well, this is more suited towards this guy because it's a PM or a PM that requires greasing fittings, or this is a PM for checking electrical connections. Like there's different people that have different skill sets.
Yeah.
And so they'll get their work orders passed down for the week by a maintenance planner.
Great. And then when it comes to like having the right parts on hand, do you guys always have the right parts on hand, or do you ever have a circumstance where you show up to the inventory room and you go, oh, nope, don't have that one?
No, it's at past jobs, yes, but no, this place is pretty good where we're most of the time right on the ball with like reorder quantities. So we have everything
that's awesome.
we need.
Perfect. You guys have already made a big first step there then. And
Yeah.
When it comes to them like getting their work orders, are they printing them out physically from that system, or how is it that they're receiving those and then entering in the data from the work order?
So they have a shared computer, well, 2 shared computers down in the maintenance shop, and a few of them have their personal laptops that they bring in. So whether it's entering it on their own laptops or through the shared computer, they're able to access it and enter in the work that was done. But there's also the paper printouts that they receive just so they can take it out on the floor, because there's recommended procedures for, hey, if you're experiencing this during the PM, check this and this, stuff like that.
Okay, so in some cases, they might have to print out that piece of paper, go over to a machine with that printout, and then take that printout back. Maybe they write some notes on it and they go back and enter in those notes on the computer.
Yeah,
is that
exactly.
kind of the process? Okay, great. And then when it comes to them like knowing what to do they print them out all the work orders for the day, and so if a new work order comes in, they don't see that, or do they have to go back to the computer every time so they know which task is the next highest priority thing for them to do?
I'm not sure I've actually noticed that. I want to say they print them all out at the beginning of the shift and then just work through it as the shift goes on. I could be wrong there, but that seems to be the process. Okay.
The reason why I'm asking these questions is we're going to we'll get in a little bit more in depth in that in a second. Let's talk about PMs. Are these work orders that they're getting, are some of them PMs, or do you guys have a system for doing PMs?
Yeah. So it's all in the same system, and it's classified versus like what the type of work order is. So they'll have PM types and then corrective actions, and the machine's down, fix it now kind of deal.
Okay, great.
But yeah, it's labeled into all sorts of different categories.
Yeah, and if there is something that has to change during the day because they have their priorities set at the beginning of the day, let's say there's a change that happens and the planner realizes that they need to make a change, do they have a way to notify their team?
Yep. So the office is right next door to the maintenance shop. So if it's not a verbal communication that, hey, this is down, they have enunciators throughout the facility, so they can inform anybody if there's an immediate need for maintenance to come over and fix something right away because it's a safety hazard or production's down and we need to fix it right away.
Okay. And so they drop everything.
There's channels. Yep.
Okay, cool. And did they ever have a situation where like a machine operator, someone taps them on the shoulder while they're trying to fix a machine, like, hey, can you look at this other machine that has a problem right now?
It definitely happens. But at that point they say, hey, there's a process that we got to follow, and they'll have them have either the operator or the supervisor for the shift submit the work order.
Oh, that's actually one of the biggest things with efficiency. So for everyone in the audience, I'm going to talk about some of the things that Dylan's company is already doing that can be helpful for everyone else's companies as well. So one thing that they're doing is those interruptions are handled by saying there's a process, and they're respectfully saying, go ahead and submit that work order through the proper channels because I have to focus on what I'm doing here. That really prevents a lot of inefficiencies, because people will often, when they're in that circumstance, they'll say, sure, I'll come over and look at it. And then they lose the focus they had on the previous task. And we find that actually can lose about 20 minutes per interruption, even if it's a quick one, because of that, your mind loses focus on what that previous task was. Another thing that Dylan's team is doing is they have these work orders set out for them. And so if you don't have a work order system to manage that, that's something that you can see huge productivity gains. I mean, typically we see, things like 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, really easily being able to be more efficient by that amount of time each day, just because of those things. And then the other one was parts, always having those right parts on hand. So if you don't have a parts management system, that's another area that can be a big impact. The reason why I'm bringing all of these things up is these are all things that can go into these hours lost per day. I would say that Dylan's team is pretty efficient from everything I've seen. The only thing I would think to see perhaps is that if they are printing things out, it does take time to get on a printer. And if they could access all of this through like their mobile device, I know that some people are even carrying around some laptops, but that might be some ways to make that more efficient and help them not have to like print something out, wait for the printer to fire up and all of those things. But Dylan, how much time would you say on average are they spending kind of like walking over the printer, waiting it for it to fire up and getting that data entered back in afterward, I should say? Yeah.
Yeah, I would probably attribute an hour to it, just with the sheer quantity of work orders that they deal with.
Wow.
Because of all the equipment in the facility. It's almost a 400,000 square foot facility, so there's a lot of stuff in there.
Oh yeah, a lot of walking around then too, because they have to go back and forth.
Yeah.
If they're going to print out. And I actually went to a facility. They had 5 buildings, but they weren't huge buildings, and we found that they were walking an extra 2 miles a day just from walking back and forth to the printer, which was nobody believed me until we like showed them the math, and they were like, oh yeah, I totally agree. So huge efficiencies we found from them just by having a mobile device, so they didn't have to walk back and forth. And so, yeah, with that being said, that hour a day of printing is really, I think that makes a lot of sense. On average, we see that when somebody goes from a paper system to a mobile device system, they save 40 minutes of wrench time per person. So that hour is falling right in line with what we typically see. Now, I know that you run closer to 365 days a year, but are your technicians working those the 6 days a week for maintenance, or are they working more than Monday through Friday?
Yeah, no, they did the 6 days. There's more of a skeleton crew for Saturday, but they typically all the 6 days.
So since I wouldn't say that we're doing the full 365 days here, but we're also not doing the 5 days a week. So I'm just going to pick a number somewhere in between to kind of adjust for that. So I'm just going to say 300 days a year to kind of make up for that skeleton crew. So in the productivity there, that's $106,000 just from that 1 hour. So it's pretty like, well, what do you think about that number? Would you have guessed that to begin with?
I would not have. That's very eye-opening.
Right. And this is why when we go with the management and say, hey, we need $2,000 to improve something, they say, no way, like we're not spending an extra $2,000. But if you said, hey, we're actually losing $106,000, I think that I can make this more efficient by, let's say, I don't know, half an hour a day. Well, that's $50,000 here. And if you're only spending even up to like $20,000, people will typically trade $20,000 for $50,000 in productivity.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, great. This has been a a great example. Dylan, thank you so much for joining us and helping us talk through this example with you.
Yeah, anytime.
Well, perfect. Well, everyone, I want to make sure that we give you some time for some questions. If we don't have any questions, I have some examples from some other customers, so you can see more ways how they've done this. But let's go to some Q&A. I think that we have some that have come up.
Yeah, one of the ones here is, does this calculator support CMMS investments? So I think what they're trying to get at is, are you using this to make a justification for an investment in a CMMS?
Yes, we typically, that's one of the ways that we see it most commonly here. I mean, we provide a CMMS system, and this is what having a CMMS is a great investment, because there's ways that you can shave off this loss in productivity really easily. The downtime, for example, is something that you typically can prevent with a software, and I'll give you an example of that. So there is a customer of ours by the name of Joe at Wisconsin Cheese. They're in the Midwest. They make cheese. No surprise there. And when I talked to Joe, he bought our software because he wanted to improve their downtime. And after they'd been using it for a few months, I said, Joe, what's the biggest problem at your facility that's causing downtime? And he said, you know what? Every day we're facing a different problem. I try to put out fires when I can, but there's no consistency here. And I said, well, let's pull up the data from your CMMS and just check. So we pulled up his downtime, and we did it in order of the assets that had the equipment that had the most amount of downtime to the least amount. And we saw that there were two pieces of equipment. They had the same make and model that were at the very top, and they were accounting for 80% of their downtime. And he said, oh, I thought that all of my equipment went down equally. And this is the power of having a software, is our brains aren't good at statistics, but the software keeps track of everything for you. And I said, well, let's take a look at these two pieces of equipment and find out the most common problems. There was the same two problems that were happening for both of these pieces of equipment that, again, was accounting for roughly 80% of the downtime for those two pieces of equipment. And Joe looked at those two problems, and then he looked up at me and he said, Miguel, I could fix those problems so they'd never happen again. I know the exact component that we would have to buy that would, because there's a problem with wear here. If we bought that component, it would stop this downtime. And so we did a rough calculation. So that was 80% of his downtime was from those two machines. And so I'm just going to do some math real quick here. So that means that 64% of his downtime could be fixed with replacing one component on two machines. And he said, Miguel, that's less than a day of work. And that is the power of having a CMMS to help you with these things. We looked at these huge downtime numbers that you might be seeing, but what do you do when you know that you have all that downtime? Well, when you can track that downtime, you can get the data you need to make the right decision on how to solve that. So sorry for the long answer, but that was a great question.
So next one is, how do you deal with more complicated businesses with different wages, different machines, different breakdown options, and external maintenance providers?
Ooh, fantastic. This is where this calculator is meant to be very basic. It's meant to be the kind of the entry level calculator. If you want to break things out, you totally can by using this calculator as kind of your starting point. For example, maybe you make a separate calculator for each line of equipment or each piece or each product you produce. You could even add more into it to say, hey, I have these vendors. How often do these downtime events lead to a vendor coming out? And you can find an average of how much you're spending on those vendors. All of this, of course, would be easier if you have a system like a CMMS to track all of that. But even if you don't, I would recommend start simple. Don't try to make this really complex for yourself. Start simple, get some rough estimates, and get your team involved so that way they can weigh in on these numbers. If your team agrees that you have an average and that sounds right to everyone, then you're probably right, and that is a great starting point.
One other clarification here. we mentioned when one of the ways to improve your technician productivity is to have a mobile device. Can you talk a little bit more about how that can improve productivity instead of having to go back and forth between a printer?
Yeah, having everything on a mobile device is something that can add to a lot of productivity in many ways. We could talk about, for example, your updates start coming in as you go. And so now your lowest productivity, your lowest priority item now became your top priority. And maybe that was set by your planner. I know that in Dylan's case, they have a planner. Then if you're working on the highest priority thing, then you're being more productive. So that's one area that leads to productivity. But another way is that each item in a CMMS could have a manual. Well, if you're completely paper-based, then you have to go find that manual, that, for example, that maintenance manual, maybe a parts list manual, and you have to go physically to find that. Maybe you have to check those out from someone because you don't want, if you lose those, then that's really bad. But if you have everything on your mobile device, then you can look that up on the spot. We have many customers that put all of their manuals on there, as well as all the equipment information that they need. So maybe they're not at the piece of equipment, but they say, oh, I need to get a part or a specific tool. They can look up the information on their mobile device. And so it allows you to have access to all this knowledge wherever you are.
One curiosity question here is, how did we come up with the name Limble?
That's a great question. It was a mix of flexible and limber. We wanted to make a system that would work for anybody in the maintenance field. And so it was flexible and limber was where that came from. But then when we said it, a lot of people were like, oh yeah, I use that word limble all the time. So I think that it's just kind of turned out to be funny like that. But
limber and nimble, right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to move quickly, and you also want to be flexible. One of the things, the principles that we have, right, is, you shouldn't have to conform to your maintenance management tool. The tool should conform to your needs. And so you should be able to customize that in the way that you want it. And that's one of the principles that we have.
Yep.
Does this CMMS have predictive and prescriptive ability to help maintenance personnel reduce downtime?
Yes, yes, Limble does, as well as other CMMS softwares. I'm sure that there are other ones out there that do. Now with Limble, we can make that so you can connect in different sensors, or some equipment already has its own capabilities to supply information. And you can use that information to predict problems and prevent them before they happen. So that's a great question, because one of the problems with downtime is, I thought Dylan had a really great example, that some of those electronics, when they go out during production, it stops production for 3 hours. But if you can predict that this is going to go out in the next month, well, then next time that you have a little bit of downtime, in Dylan's case, I think it was like on a Sunday afternoon, then the equipment's already down, it's not running, it's already been planned to be down. You can swap out those electronics. So next time it goes up, you don't have to worry about the equipment going down.
And yeah, next one, is this a desktop tool or a SaaS platform? And pretty sure he's talking about our tool, not talking about the spreadsheet.
Yeah, the spreadsheet, we'll send all of you a copy of that. That's going to be just an Excel file. Now, Limble is completely cloud, which means that you can access it from your phone. You can access it from anywhere. We have companies that use it out in the ocean, for example, or up on the top of a mountain, because it's all cloud-based. And there are desktop versions of their CMMS softwares out there. And I would say the big differences are, if it's desktop, then you're missing out on the ability to be accessing it from anywhere, making sure that your data is never lost. That's one great thing about the cloud, is we have great systems for making sure your data is always secure and never going to be lost or have any issues with that.
Great. Next one is, do we have customers that are in the refining or petrochemical industries?
Yes, 100%. The thing about when it comes to refining or any of those petrochemical processes is you're not doing things in like the sense of a batch. You're doing it as a continuous process. And in many ways, it's very similar to production, of manufacturing, I should say. And so you do care about downtime. For example, we have some customers that are in electrical production, they're power plants. Well, you'd never want to have the situation where there's downtime with that because people are losing power. And so there's typically more redundancies built. And that is really important as well to make sure you've maintained that properly. And the same maintenance principles apply to them as well.
Great. Last one that I have right now is this customer is trying to basically understand what's the difference between a CMMS and an EAM and APM, and how do they integrate with IIoT, and how are we personally positioned on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a CMMS is a computerized maintenance management system. An EAM is an enterprise asset management system. And so a CMMS is going to be much more focused on the maintenance part of it. The enterprise asset management system, this is actually something that I'm seeing is becoming a little bit more, the lines are becoming a little bit more blurred because a really good CMMS should have those same EAM software capabilities. And so I typically see that is, that's already happening with Limble as our software. We call it a CMMS, but it's also an enterprise asset management system. As far as APM goes, I believe you're referring to application performance management. I'm not 100% sure. And that would be something, let me just check on that.
Asset performance management, it's more of like an approach to how you manage assets, not necessarily, as I understand it, not necessarily a software.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is where your specific needs for that, we'd have to kind of talk through those. But your asset performance for most companies is going to be based on the amount of downtime they're having. And that is also covered by a system that provides an EAM or a CMMS. Now, I want to open up that question again. I'm going to pull that up because there was a second piece to this. I believe it was IoT related.
IoT.
Okay. Yes, and this is where I always think that wherever you're having issues in the company, you always want to think about what are the biggest issues, and let's focus on those next. So if you remember the example from Joe at Whiskers and Cheese, he had a lot of downtime that was coming from 2 machines. So once he was able to identify the biggest sources of his downtime, he could make the biggest impact by solving those first. So at your company, consider what are the biggest impacts. If you don't know what the biggest impacts are, find a way to measure where the biggest downtime is coming from. So in this example of IIoT or using any sort of devices to measure your equipment, if you know that one piece of equipment is your biggest source of problems, you might want to consider having a sensor for it to measure, for example, temperature or vibration that hopefully can give you some warning before a problem occurs. And I always say, if you're going to do that, consider, you want to do that on your pieces of equipment that are most critical or causing the most problems.
We got a couple more here. How do we handle loss of connectivity in our platform?
Oh yeah, we have a lot of customers that are out in the middle of nowhere. I know one customer, for example, they're constantly going in and out of these canyons where there's no cellular signal. So we have an offline mode. So when they go out of cellular signal, they're still able to use the software, still able to access information. And then when they get back into signal, everything updates. So that way they can use it. We also have another customer that goes out in the middle of the ocean where they lose cellular signal as well. Same thing in the morning, they get all their data, they go out to sea, do everything as they work, come back in, and they're good to go again.
It looks like we're just about the end of time here.
Yeah, we're getting close.
Well, we can do this one last question. How feasible is the integration of Limble to enterprise IoT platforms?
Yeah, so Limble's made to be really flexible. It has an API where you can have the Limble talk to other systems, whether you're having Limble send information or get information, and that is exactly what we designed it to be. So if you have a system like that, then that's something that a modern software should be able to provide a great solution for.
All right.
All right, I think we're out of time. Oh, and I'd love to talk about TPM. TPM, I totally support that, and that we do have solutions for that, but we do need to give it back to Lucian, I believe. Lucian, do we have time to answer one more question? Or are we out?
You might still be on mute.
Okay, yeah, Lucian. All right, well, if you guys can give us a rating, be honest, we want to make sure we can improve as well. While you're doing that, I will answer this question about TPM. I think that when it comes to maintenance strategies, there is there's a lot of different things you can use, such as having everybody be involved in the maintenance process. And I totally recommend thinking about what would work best for you, and a software like ours can help you manage that transition. Licensing, don't really have time to talk about that, but you can visit our website. If you just type in Limble CMMS in any Google search, you'll be able to learn more. All right, and big thanks to Dylan for being such a brave volunteer. Well, while we're wrapping up, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Hopefully this is helpful. We will send you a copy of this calculator. You can use it as a starting place. And what we want for you guys is to have the resources you need to really excel and shine in your jobs. And so hopefully this is a step forward. If you need help with anything, this is the mission of our company, is to make sure that you guys are really successful. So let us know how we can help you. All right, getting a lot of thanks from the audience. Thank you guys for joining, and let us know if there's anything we can do in the future. Looks like you have your next session coming up here. Have a good one, everyone. We'll see you.